Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode. Welcome to the new live stream. We're gonna do a game, an FPS first person shooter from scratch. I'm gonna show you my full process, unfiltered in Unity, how I work. Of course we will take feedback from the chat. We will also do questions and answers all the time. So stay tuned if you're interested in this. I'll be one eye on chat, one eye on code and everywhere around. So, okay, let's see who's in chat first. So, yeah, I see Ice Master, Minto, Polski, Quadrat, Sundaran, Christian. Hey guys, hi, welcome. Yeah, I think Ice Master changed his name from something AS something. Yeah, nice. Okay, so yeah, don't worry about that. By the way, first, before you start, I want to ask you, are you hearing me well? Is everything fine on your side? So I know to make sure that everything is perfect before we dive into Unity. By the way, can you hear me well? Okay. Okay, that's good. Cool. And I think we can actually start, and I want to point out just a couple of things. So we're going to use some packages, actually one provided by Unity, to kickstart our adventure for today's episode. I'm going to cover a couple of different topics. For example, we'll discuss about movement, we'll discuss about the weapon, a little about animations. There are different types of animations. We might dive into them just a little. How to instantiate projectiles and how to move them around, and lastly how to create enemies and how to move them around as well. So stay tuned, we're gonna go through the first, and of course we're gonna build on top of everything. So let's kickstart it then. So the first thing you need to do is of course start a new project, and you probably are familiar with Unity Hub, or if not, you just click new basically, and you are shown this screen, and you can pick basically 3D, which will get you the default render pipeline template, or you can go for universal render pipeline. The asset that we are going to use, Unity standard asset pack, I don't think it's optimized for URP, but we can fix that. So I'll just go with this one. So I'll just say Unity, new Unity project. Gonna create, and meanwhile I'm gonna show you default standard. I'm gonna show you the standard asset pack. So Unity has this asset pack called Unity Standard Assets. It's actually for Unity 2018.4, so of course it doesn't have the URP, but it does have some functionality. So if you jump straight away in this, and you'll notice that there are some errors with this package, so we can fix them. I mean, we can just delete some stuff that we don't want, so we can dive right into the package. I think when developing a game, it's really important to not just do everything yourself. I mean, if you know what you're doing and you understand other people's code, you should definitely leverage it. The problem is that a lot of people just think we can just like take packages without knowing what they actually do or their consequences, and they don't know how to tweak them, or they get stuck very early, because otherwise it's really hard if you don't understand what's really happening there. So yeah, as you can see, open project is busy for 1 minute. So of course it takes some time, because Unity creates basically it puts in all the packages that are needed for the project to start. So the initial process might take a little time. If I would have gone for the default render pipeline, it would have been faster, but then if I wanted to import the universal render pipeline, then would have taken time. So basically that time is put in right now. But I wanted to show you the full process, so this is why we are doing it from scratch. And exactly how I'm getting the packages, how I'm putting them in the projects, how I'm fixing the errors, and so on and so forth. So if you have any questions while we idling this project, by the way guys, please tell me in the comment section. I'm looking forward even questions that are not hi there that are not especially that might not be related to the project that we're doing, but like to game dev in general. We can do that as well. So if you're interested, yeah, you can just drop me a comment and I'll make sure to respond to your answer. Yeah, and also I don't know if you've seen. Okay, I'm gonna try to reduce the background music. Thanks for the tip. Thanks for that tip. So I think now it should be much more better. So actually I'm gonna, you know what, I'm gonna change to big screen. I'm gonna change to big screen because right now it's just Unity is just creating stuff, so it's not really important. So we can, before we actually import stuff. Oh, just bought Playmaker. Yeah, I think Playmaker is good. You should have tried first Bolt, which is free, which does the same thing. I think Unity aims to support Bolt, so at some point they will just deprecate Playmaker by making Bolt to Playmaker's progress. I do think visual scripting is a little limiting, so you shouldn't aim for a game fully visual scripting. Okay, so we have one question: what is the use of serialized field? And I can show you once the project starts. I can show you quickly. Actually, I'm gonna, you know what? I'm gonna write in the questions that you send me that I cannot answer in the moment, because I can answer, but I want to show you as well what they mean. Okay, I think the project is starting, guys. I think the project is starting. So by the way, here you see here is like the list of questions that I'm getting that I could not have answered until this point. But now it seems that we are having the project started. So this is how an empty project looks if you import the universal render pipeline. So as you can see, it's still importing some stuff. You get this nice tools room, which, yeah, it works, but we are not gonna use it. So I'm just gonna quickly start a new scene. So you can see what I did was file, new scene, and then create. So this creates a new scene, and here we can actually start doing stuff. But of course, I cannot do anything until this point because we need some new packages. So what you need to get in the packages, first of course you need to go to the Unity Asset Store on the web page. You need to log in and you need to select the package that you want. You either have to add it to your assets if it's free package, if not you have to buy it to your account. But once you have it, you need to be logged in. Then you can go to Unity and Window, Package Manager, and here you can just search. I think you need to change My Assets, because basically it's part of your assets library now. It's not Unity default, even though it's Unity standard assets. Basically it's standard assets published package. So of course I'm just gonna type in the name here and I'm gonna get the package. They haven't released any updates, but it's gonna be fine. I'm just gonna import it. Of course, if a package has an update and you don't have it, it will show here an update button which you can click and then import it. But this package doesn't have any updates, so we're just gonna use what we have. So I'm just quickly gonna import this package. As you can see, it starts to prepare the package. I'm gonna show you what exactly is happening. So this is the screen that appears once Unity download the package internally, locally, I mean. You are prompted with this and you can import whatever you want. And why not? Let's import everything for now. You can pick whatever you want to import or not. But if I import everything, you'll notice that we're gonna have some errors because this package was not actually updated for the latest Unity. So if you use this, because I think still this package has something useful, it has some controllers that are quite nice. For example, the FPS controller, which is decent, which can do the basic stuff, so we don't have to do it from scratch, so you can just leverage the package for us. So I'm just gonna quickly import the package. As you can see, is busy right now, so still importing some stuff. By the way, I'm having my coffee ready, so this will follow us through the tutorial, because yeah, coffee is powering people to create code. If you don't know it, now you know. So yeah, okay, I think the package is imported, so we can close this window now because it's not important anymore. So we'll just hop into this, and I'm gonna quickly, so from project, usually here you can see down below, you can see errors that you have. So first thing first, in the console, what I like to do is I like to clear my console. So I like to hit clear, because usually some errors are not actually errors, or that are import errors, or other errors that can disappear once you clear them. So actually what is relevant error here is the fact that guide text is obsolete. Of course is obsolete because the package is not working for the new version. So of course simple activator menu must go. So unfortunately for a simple activator menu, I can actually see, so standard assets, utility, and yeah, so I'm sorry, simple activator menu, you have to go. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see stuff like this, as you can see. So what I like to do is I like to hold scroll or hit this one and see them like this. So I can just delete the script because it's not worth it. We don't use it, so unfortunately it has to go. Of course we cannot use everything from this package, but what we can do is just remove what's obsolete and stick with what still works. Of course at some point probably nothing will work, so then we'll just need a new package, but that's not the point right now. Okay, so usually it doesn't take so long for it to compile scripts, but I think because there are a lot of scripts together, it takes longer because it has to compile all the assembly that holds all the scripts. So that's why it might take some more time. Okay, now if I clear the project, oh, it's empty. So this means that that was the only thing that we needed to do to fix the problem. So what we can do here is, of course, go to sample scenes, because I want to go to scenes. And there is the character first person, which is a scene that I really like. But the problem here is, as you can see, everything is pink, and everything is pink because of, well, we imported a project that is default render pipeline into universal render pipeline. So of course the materials don't work anymore because they changed the shaders. So fix for this would be to go in and change them from edit, render pipeline, universal render pipeline, upgrade project materials to universal render pipeline, and this will upgrade all the project materials that they can find into URP materials. So boom, now it works. As you can see, we have something, so that's really nice. So what I can do here is I can play the scene, and now for the scene play we can actually move around because it's an FPS controller. So as you know, the first thing is done. So we actually have something already. Of course, this might not be exactly what you need. You might want some other parameters. You might need some different head bobbing. For example, you see that it has a small head bob. It has a different speed on sideways. It has a different speed on running. And what we can do here is, of course, go here to the Rigidbody first-person controller. And we can check in the, so once I select the object, so all the objects in the scene are in the hierarchy. Once I select the Rigidbody FPS controller, which is the object that handles the player for us. We can see that this script, so I'm gonna close these scripts because these components, because they don't interest us. I can see that we do have some advanced settings that will allow us to change the forward speed, backward speed, strafe speed, run multiplayer, even run key, and so on and so forth. So we can do a lot of changes here. So yeah, we can just do it from here, and we can customize this as we want. So one question here that a lot of people ask is why there is a character controller based on the character controller component? Why is there a character controller based on the a rigid body? And what's the difference? What's the main difference? So probably if I'll create a new game object, let's say, and add, I can say character controller. So you see there is this component called character controller, but the rigid body FPS controller doesn't have it. It has the rigid body. So that's the big difference. So character controller is more of hard-coded way of making a character move. So that means it doesn't take into account complex physics. For example, if you are on a slope and you put your character and you want the character to fall little by little because you have ice on that slope, and it just smoothly glides. With the character controller, you won't have that. You won't be able to walk on some different types of stairs, or you might have to customize the level to fit it. So one advantage of the character controller is the fact that it's super simple to use. You don't have to do anything extra. You just put it on a game object. It creates this area around the object, as you can see, which actually does the collision, but it's very basic collision, so it's mostly used for out of the box. Maybe in some cases this is what you need, but if you need collisions, proper collisions with a lot of objects, or sliding down slopes, or more complex stuff, then you need to go with the FPS controller, but this needs a script that does this. So that's by default we have this, so that's luckily for us, we can just use it. And as you can see, it does the job as well. So if I were to run the same example with both of them, then we'll have the same effect. But if this slope, for example, would be ice slope, and I would glide, I would only glide with a rigid body FPS controller. By the way, with the FPS controller, we can actually set, for example, the mass of the player, or angular drag, which actually is the friction between the collider and the environment. So if that's interesting for you, then let me know in the comments below. Musica. Okay, I'm gonna do the music down a little more. So now that we have the main movement, and I have explained basically the difference between character controller and rigid body first-person controller, what we can do is just simply leverage this scene for our advantage and make use of it. So now that we have the player, let's put a gun to the player. So we need some new concepts for this. So what we need is actually to leverage some of Unity's functionalities, some default functionalities, and I'm going to create a new folder in the assets. So I'm going to create, and what I like to do here, it's not necessary, but this is like a pro tip that I've been using it for a lot of time. I create this folder called assets. So what does it do? Well, basically it separates my assets from the rest of the assets, because one problem that I've seen in the asset store is once you start importing a lot of packages, they'll mess up your project and you will not be able to see what are your assets and what are the other project assets. You might move them around, which is good. I mean, you can keep the structure from the beginning, from the start. But then the problem comes, if you want to upgrade those packages, then what's next? Because if you upgrade the packages, they'll be put in the same assets folder, and you'll have to redo the structure again and again. So instead of maintaining that structure, I'm bypassing that structure and creating this assets folder. So in here, we'll just create two folders. The first one will be prefabs. And the second one, I'm using right click here. So right click, create, folder, scripts, prefabs and scripts. And these are two new concepts that we are going to explain. So in prefabs is a way for Unity to understand objects that are that we have one object which is specified in one way, and then we can make a lot of different instances of that object in the scene. And if we change that original object, all of these instances will change as well. So by leveraging prefabs, we actually get a lot of power, because for example, if you have like a slope that we want to change color, if you manually put in the slope, like here, like in this demo, and you want to change the color, then you have to manually go and change for every slope. But if we create a prefab out of that slope, then we can change one and it will change everywhere. Okay, so let's see. So how do we create a prefab? That's the first thing. So if you want to create a new prefab, and I'm gonna create a weapon prefab in this case, we need to create a new empty game object. And this is another tip which I really enjoy. So I'm gonna say player gun. I like to create my prefabs with the empty game object as the root element. As you see here, all these objects are in the main scene, but if I expand these objects, inside of them there are other objects. These objects are parented to the objects that they have on this hierarchy. So what does this do is the fact that when the parent moves, or when the parent rotates, or when the parent scales, the objects inside do the same or follow the parent as well. So this might help us because, for example, we need the weapon to follow the player. So how can we do that? Well, we can just follow the player by doing this. So that's really convenient for us. So I'm gonna create here in the player gun, I'm gonna create a 3D object cube. You see, right now the cube is not parented to the player gun. The weapon will basically be just some cubes, because we don't need to go into details too much. I want to show you how to create everything from scratch, and you can create it yourself. So first you notice that it was at a different position, so I changed the position to 0, 0, 0, and I moved this with click and drag, and you see now it's parented to the player gun. So player gun, if I move the player gun and I can move it with this transform tool, the player gun is actually at a different position. So that's a problem which usually occurs if you parent an object and you don't check its position afterwards. So if I go here, oh, the position it's not 0, 0, 0 anymore. So I have to go and change it. And now they're in the same position. So this is called the origin position. So it would be preferred to have these objects close to the origin position. You'll see very soon why. Because of course, once we move this object, the others will move very randomly if they're not close to the origin. So here we're just going to duplicate this, and I'm going to start modeling with cubes, a really small gun, and just changing the scale and rotation. By the way, I'm using keys now, but the commands are up here, but the keys are Q is for this, W, E, R, T, and so on and so forth. But we use the move tool, we use the rotate tool, and the scaling tool. So now we have that. We also need to do this part. What I could have done instead was to delete this, and once I like this one, just duplicate this one, and yeah, just rotate this. I can make sure it's 90 degrees because I want it to be perfect. Okay, so going back to scale a little, maybe a little bigger, so to be beefier. So this is the gun. Of course, it would be dull if the weapon is gray, like the environment. So you're gonna quickly add the material to it. So to add colors, what you need to do is, of course, you can add it through texture, but even textures need to be applied. Unity needs to know how to apply textures or how to apply colors to objects. So to do this, we need materials. So I'm gonna create this folder, materials. I'm gonna right click, create new material. It's good if you put the name in this, because you can, for example, you need a material and you're in the assets folder, right? So the easiest way to do it is just to write material. And then of course you get a lot of material, but yeah, I can see the gun material here. So it filters by the name. So it's quite convenient to use this. Of course you can filter by type as well, which is super convenient because yeah, I can just filter by type and it gives me the same stuff. By the way, you can input here the type dot double dots, but it doesn't matter, we have the material. And on this one I need to go to the inspector, so it doesn't matter if the object is here or the object is in the project. You see the inspector changes based on my selected object. So right now I'm selecting the gun material, so we'll change the color to red because why not. And then to apply it to our current weapon, I'm just gonna drag and drop for this one. So that's one way to do it. Another one would be to click on this, and you can see here there is a material, but we cannot edit this. So we can go to the mesh render component. So every object in the scene has some default components, which is transform. Every object has transform, even empty game object. But then if we have a visual object, for example, a mesh is a cube, a mesh is a sphere, a mesh is a player model, it doesn't matter the complexity. It will have two things to be able to show in a scene. The mesh filter, which points to the correct object, 3D object, and the mesh renderer, which has some data on how that object gets rendered. So in this case, I can see it has this lit material, which we are not going to use because we're going to use the material that I just created. So I'm just going to drag and drop it here. Alternatively, we could just hit this target and then scroll through all the materials and just pick, oh, gun material, and pick it, and now it's changed. So we have the player gun, but right now the player gun is not a prefab, and it has actually colliders, so we don't need colliders, and we don't need it to be, and we need it to be a prefab. So first I'm gonna remove the colliders. So by default, every cube or every default shape in Unity comes with its own collider, but we don't need the colliders for this case, so I'm gonna remove component. And how do we notice that we have colliders even without checking the inspector? Well, you see here there is this green line. It's kind of hard to see, but there is a green line on the object that you can see in some angles. Of course, here, for example, it's a green line. So if I disable it or remove it, I like to remove it because I want the line to disappear. This would mean that the gun won't collide with the environment. We just want to see it on the object. So now, to make it a prefab, we'll go to the prefabs folder and we'll drag and drop the player gun here. And now the player gun changed the color. So what's the power of the prefab is the fact that, for example, if I drag and drop this into the scene, I create a new weapon. And if I modify the prefab inside, but of course the prefab is kind of tricky how to edit it inside. So what I recommend is to go into the prefab editing mode. So click on this, open prefab, and let's change this position. Of course, save it. And now we can go back by either clicking scenes or clicking this small arrow. So I'm gonna click scenes. And as you can see, both weapon prefabs got changed. So that's a nice way to edit prefabs. If you would select, because you can see I can select the objects here. If you were to select the object here, it's not actually modifying the prefab, but it's actually modifying this particular instance of the prefab. So to make the changes from here, we need to do an extra step. We need to go back to the prefab here, and we need to go to overrides, and it says, okay, so the cube one has this transform modified, so we can just say, oh, apply all. So now it got applied to the other weapon, but I'm gonna remove this one because it doesn't matter. So let's go back to the Rigidbody FPS controller. So we can go back to it by double clicking it or by pressing the F key on keyboard. So these are the two options. So to parent the player gun to the FPS controller, what we need to do is to parent it under the main camera, because if we don't parent it to the main camera, it won't move with the camera. So in this case, for example, we'll get the weapon movement. So we'll get the rotating weapon movement, but if the camera is pointed up or down, the weapon will stay rotated by the player, not by the camera. I'm going to quickly show you that. But one thing here I want to point out is if I just drag and drop it here, Sometimes this operation might not work because Rigidbody FPS Controller is of course a prefab as well. So yeah, it worked this time, but sometimes it might not work. Sometimes you might not put new objects into prefab and you need to enter the prefab edit mode. So I'm just gonna quickly put it here, and we can see that the main camera is pointing that way. So we need to do some small adjustments to this. And what I like about game development is that you actually like do some adjustments and then hit play and see what actually happens. So you don't have to be perfect every time. You just have to do it and like put and hey Edwin, hey, welcome. So right now the weapon, as you can see, so this is the problem that I was mentioning. So the weapon is stuck to the Rigidbody player, but it's fixed. It's not it's moving with the player, which is nice, but its main problem is that it doesn't move with the camera. So this is an easy fix. We can just reparent this to the main camera, and now of course it will move with the main camera. And now it moves as expected. Of course, we don't want our weapon to be like Wolfenstein, if you know the game, Wolf 3D, in the center of the screen, or Doom, the first DOS game, not the latest Doom installments. So we need to rotate it a little and we need to position it a little. I think the size might be tweaked a little as well. We need to see if it works or not. What do you think? Is the weapon size too big? Is the weapon too big? Or probably it's a little too big. So I think the rotation is a little too much. I think a little the scale might be tweaked. So yeah, let's just do it. So I'm gonna rotate it back and just gonna scale it quickly. Move it a little to the side. Save, of course, and play it. Let's see what it does. Okay. Now we have something. We have weapon. I think a little rotated more might be. What this particular thing does, on top of the processing of the scripts right now, it actually processes the global illumination, which, as you can see down here, it takes some performance. So it's quite annoying because with each scene change, we actually get that. So I would recommend you to go to Window, go to Rendering and Lighting, and then we'll get this screen, which I like to put here. So Inspector and Lighting, and yeah, untick Auto Generate. So basically what Auto Generate does is generate new lighting for the scene. So every time we move an object, it will generate lighting. So we don't want that because initially, while we are developing the project, we just want it as fast as possible, and then we want it to make beautiful. So right now I'm just gonna untick Auto Generate. So now the player gun is done, is working as expected, like to have a gun on top of the player. But now we need to make it shootable, right? So we need to have a projectile to be able to shoot the gun. So here we'll do the projectile prefab and we'll do the projectile script, and I'm gonna answer the serialized field and what that does. Hey Nool Soup, welcome to the stream. I'm gonna tell you what serialized field is. Of course, if you have other questions, yeah, please let them in the chat. I'm looking all the time at the chat, so if you have any questions, yeah, please put them there. I'll make sure to answer them. Okay, so to create a new game object, a new prefab, of course, the procedure is like this. We create a new empty game object. I'll just call it projectile. And then inside this projectile, we'll create a, I would like a cube. Yeah, put it here, projectile cube. As you can see, I like to be 0, 0, 0, and then going to projectile. And as you can see, it's way big, but the cube is gonna be changed. So we're gonna change the cube size. So the cube size gets changed, but when we move the projectile, we move it from the parent. So we're gonna use the gun as a reference. I think that's a good way. And another tip here to to make sure that because you might get a struggle like, oh, how do I position this to be perfectly aligned or perfectly close to the weapon? Because in 3D space it might be complicated. So I'll give you two different ways that I like to do it to make sure that two objects are close to. So the first one would be to detect intersections. So I'll just move the objects and I see, oh, now it intersects. So this means that it's actually here and it's not, for example, way here. You see, if it might be here and you might be thinking, oh, it's close to the gun, but if we rotate like this, it's actually far from the gun. So if I move it here, it doesn't intersect. So you see, this is a perspective problem. So to fix this, what I like to do is just move the object around and see when the intersect happens. And if the intersect happens, that means that they're close. And I can move it here. Another way to do it, which is probably the perfect way to assure that the objects are in the correct position, is to change from perspective to isometric, because isometric removes this perspective issue, but of course now this angle doesn't help us. So we need two different angles to make sure that are aligned. So the first one would be a top angle. So I need to make sure that they're in isometric top perfect. And then on the side angle, they need to be like this. Don't forget, it needs to be isometric, not perspective. If it's perspective, you will still have the same issues. So in isometric, make sure that the left or right, or it doesn't matter, top and left or right needs to be aligned perfectly. And now the bullet is inside the weapon. So as you can see, it actually is, let's say, the correct size. I'm gonna quickly go inside the cube and add a new cube here just to make it nicer. I'm gonna remove the box colliders because I'll show you in a second how we're gonna detect collision with a projectile, so it won't be through this. So the projectile will be something like this. Of course, we're gonna remove this one. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I want it to be simple projectile. So we're just gonna drag this into prefabs, and boom, now we have a projectile prefab, because in this case we want to instantiate a lot of projectiles. The game won't have only one bullet, right? It will have a lot of bullets. So here we have it. So now I'm going to the scripts and I'm gonna create a projectile script. There are a couple of ways of doing the scripts, but I like to create it in the project folder, because by doing this you actually put it in the right place from the beginning. Otherwise you might have to go into projects folder, go into assets, and then see the script that is there and then drag it and drop it in the correct folder. So that's a little cumbersome. Of course, it's better to take as many shortcuts as possible, because otherwise you'll be stuck in handling stuff instead of creating games. So let's just double click this. Visual Studio opens. Of course, your editor of choice might be Visual Studio, might be Visual Studio Code. It doesn't matter, both do a great job. Yeah, we're gonna use Visual Studio for this one. I don't know why it takes so much time, but probably it's because I'm doing sessions, so I'm streaming on the same PC, so probably that's the problem. So this is the script that it's created by default in Unity, and I've also mentioned this in my first Learn C# coding video. This is the default script that you are having. So I'm just gonna remove this content. I'm gonna change this a little. So usually I like the scripts to be empty and start doing stuff from here. So what projectile does need? Well, it needs a speed, it needs a lifetime, and of course it needs the damage that it does. So these are the variables. By the way, I have a video about mistakes with variables, but I'll also be doing, I think tomorrow I'll drop a video how to use variables and different variables types. So if you want to learn about them, watch that first and then watch the mistakes. But I'm gonna quickly say, okay, so now we have like this private, and here 4 movements, and we'll just take them each one. So float, move, speed. So now we created a new variable, and let's quickly go through each of these names to see what they mean. So what interests us is float and move speed. Well, float is the variable type, which in this case means it can be a number with a dot. Let's say 1.234, right? Move speed is the actual variable name, and here by convention in C# we do the underscore thing. This is to know that this is a class variable because it's in a class. So if it's in a class, we just do underscore. This is a convention, and also this is a convention for private variables. So what does private variable mean, and why is this red, you might ask? So the first thing, this number, if we input this number, it's actually a double, not the float. Double is another data type. To make it a float, you need to append an f after. So in this way, we just append an f. By the way, if you leave it like this, you'll get the error here, literal blah blah blah. Use f suffix to create. So it tells you what you need to do. You need to create f here. Okay, created f. It works now. But would be nice if this variable actually, when I click it, of course, reloading script. When I click it here, I'll quickly add the projectile to the projectile script to the projectile, because otherwise it won't work. So to add it, I can simply click the projectile here in the project folder. And now, oh, I need to go to scripts and get that. But if I go to scripts and I click the projectile, it changes, so that's a problem. So I need to do it. There are a couple of different ways to actually put it. One way is to add component and then search for projectile. That's a quick way to do it. Another way to do it would be to just click this and just drag and drop this. And the third way to do it would be to click this one, lock it in place. You see this small lock, and now if I click this script, it doesn't unlock. It still shows the projectile. Right, so now I have the projectile assigned to the projectile script, but it would be nice to be able to go to this projectile and change the speed, to tweak the speed. So to tweak the speed, there are two ways to do it, but you can see here it's no value like these values. So first what you can do is change this to public. And if I change that to public and reload the scripts and recompile the scripts, because that's what it needs to do, it will show in the script component, which is not, so it will show here. But the difference between serialized field and public is the fact that if the projectile class is referenced in another class, they will have access to this move speed, and we don't want to have access from other classes, from other objects. For example, I don't want the gun to change the projectile speed, and if I would need another way, because this is also a programming convention. So we need to set this private back. But the problem now, if we set this private back, of course that field will disappear. So that's not what we want. We want to make sure that it does appear. So here we can use the serialized field. So serialized field is a tag basically. You can use different tags in different places, but what this does is actually it still displays this, but it doesn't allow, because it maintains the private of that particular field. So it cannot be modified by other scripts. So this is the difference between public and serialized field. I would recommend to use serialized field as much as possible. So I hope that answers your question. If you have other questions, yeah, please leave them in the chat down below. I'm looking at the chat, by the way. So I'm looking for your questions. But let's go back to the projectile. So now that we have a move speed, let's move the projectile. So how do we move the projectile? So we have one function that's provided by the Unity that updates this script and every script that's in the scene, because script only execute stuff in them only if they're attached to objects in the scene. So that's called update. And I like my autocomplete because it provides everything for me. By the way, the update is actually provided when you create a new empty script. This is called every single frame. So how can we move the projectile, you ask? So there is this component, transform, which is a default Unity component, and this component is exactly the one here. So it's the same component. So go here. Games source code. Well, there are some decompilers that you can use, but I would recommend you to just take the source code to get inspiration from, because there are some copyrights on the source code from big projects, so you might get into legal problems if you just copy paste code from those. But if you're curious how someone achieved something, then you can definitely go look. But I don't think it's even worth it, because you can just check GitHub, because there are a lot of projects there and you can already check it from there. But I suggest to do your own scripts, because that's a nice way to do it and the most convenient. So transform, and here there is this method also provided by Unity, translate. So what translate does is actually taking the value that the position has and adds a new value, and the new value is the new distance and direction that we want to move the projectile into. So here we need to do some couple of stuff. So we need to take into account the move speed. So we need the move speed, which we need to multiply with, and vector 3 forward and also transform forward means that it gives you a basic vector of 1, 1, 1 in a particular direction to specify that direction. But to actually make sure that we have the proper velocity, we do need the movement speed. So I like to use Paint for this, because I think it's much better to understand. So of course you have the origin point, and it has different axes. It has the x-axis, it has the z-axis, the y, and let's say the z-axis. So we have the axis here, and now if I want, for example, to move in this direction, x-axis, I'll just say, oh, give me forward vector of 1. And of course this vector is not by one element, because vector 3 contains 3 elements, contains a x, y, and z. So in this case it would be 1, 0, 0 vector. So this is forward, I think. I don't know exactly where the 1 is, but usually that's what I get. If I wanted to move diagonally, so I want to move it like this on x and y, it would be probably 1, 1, 0. So this is really important, because this is called the normalized vector. So probably you have seen the normalizing part of a vector. So this is what that means. Okay, so what we need here, what we need still to do here, of course we can play it, because the projectile, since it's script already, we can actually play it. But I'm gonna drag the game and I'm gonna put it here. I don't know exactly, but you should be careful. I won't risk it. Probably one thing would be, if you copy a game and that game has success and it's actually very similar to another game. For example, you create Fortnite by copying PUBG. Well, they kind of know, like, they have the same mechanics, they have the same kind of like what you need to do. So of course they won't target small people that make small games that are not relevant. But if you have success, then you will be checked by other people. They will see, like, if oh, you stole from them. I mean, when Fortnite was launched, PUBG, the company that makes PUBG, actually sued the Fortnite creators because of this. Of course, not because stealing the code, but because stealing the idea. But it's not different, because they'll see, oh, is the idea similar? Oh, let's see if the code is similar, and then let's see if the props are similar or the art is similar. So that's the problem. If you have success, it will matter. If you don't have success, then you can do it. But what's the point in publishing something if you don't want success with it, right? Okay, so we can play this right now, and I wanted to show you in the scene And yeah, the projectile is moving, and it's moving at a constant speed, but we didn't take something into account. So this doesn't take into account the frames per second. So this update actually happens on how many frames per second do you have. If you run it on 60 FPS, it will happen the 60 times per second. If you run it on 120 FPS, you'll have 120 updates. So of course this is a problem, because this means that people with high refresh screens that play your game at high refresh rates, they will have a higher projectile speed. So you don't want that. I mean, that would be cheating, right? So what we need to do here is multiply this by time.delta time, which is the time between frames getting rendered. So by doing this, we save this kind of thing. But of course you need to adjust the speed, because right now it's going to be too slow. So I'm going to quickly... Hey Moonboy, how's it going? But it's moving, all right? But now let's make this. By the way, if you see that some usings are colored like this, we have gray. This means that they are not used. Then you can click, if you're using Visual Studio, you can click this and remove unnecessary ones. It's just I like it clean. Now we need to go and make the player fire projectiles, right? So we need a couple of things for this. We need the new script called player gun. Of course, this needs to be attached to the player gun, right? So we need to attach this to the player gun. So yeah, we'll just go to the prefab, because it's much safer to do it like this instead of dragging and dropping it here. Open prefab and going to scripts, player gun. And one thing here that I like to do is, of course, open the script. I'm gonna delete this, and here we need a couple of different things. We need where the point where the projectiles get launched from the gun. Otherwise, we'll use the gun's position, and then it will yeah. Even if you modify something in the code. With machine learning today, I mean, for example, they have, in universities, they have algorithms to detect if a paper was copied from another place. So yeah, good luck copying other code. But even if you copy code, you'll still encounter problems. So if you don't understand what's going on, you'll hit some roadblocks, and you won't be able to continue. Even if you take all the asset packs and you take all what's necessary, you cannot make a game if you don't understand what's actually happening there. So yeah, so the initial point is where the actual projectile gets instantiated or gets created. It needs to be a serialized field. So I said instead of using public, we're going to use serialized field, because you don't want this field to be modified by other classes. And here, of course, we need the update. And here we need, actually we need also the projectile. So I'm going to use another serialized field. I'm going to say projectile. I'm going to say here projectile prefab. So this field will actually get the projectile prefab, which is going to be instantiated. So if I say, right, if is a command that branches the execution, so otherwise the execution will be one element by one element. But if branches the execution in if this, then do this. If not, then do this. So now I need to detect if the mouse was pressed. So get mouse button. Okay, nice question. I have noticed most devs are still using the old input system. Is there a reason for it, or just not move to the new input system? So I'd say it's because of convenience. One, because you already, I mean, if you have all the code in the options menu to automatically change keys, and it works for you and it works for the asset packs that you use, you shouldn't change. There are some benefits of the new input system that I see. One benefit would be the fact that you can actually much more easily handle a lot of different inputs at the same local PC. So for example, if you do a split screen or a local multiplayer game on the same PC and you want to instantiate new people in the game, you'll see with the new input system is way much faster to do it than with the old one. It's much more simple as well. So for that particular use case, I think it's definitely worth it. For a single player game or even a multiplayer game, but it has only one player controlling the character, I don't see any benefit. Probably more tweaking capabilities, but if a lot of games were made with the old input system, then this works fine as well. Of course, at some point when we'll get the new input system embedded into Unity, right now it's not embedded, right now it's a package. So it's inconvenient. I mean, you have to put in a package, while this I just use it. So of course it's much more easier to use. So basically, if you're not developing a game, a local player game with more instances, by the way, it also creates, for example, if you create a split screen game, then the new input system automatically creates new cameras and assigns them and breaks the window into separate cameras, which is a pain if you want to do it with the old system. So that's really awesome. So I hope this answers your questions. Yeah, if there's still uncertainty, yeah, just ask me and I'll try to make sure that it's clear. So here, there's a difference between get mouse button and get mouse button down or up. So get mouse button means that if I hold a mouse button pressed all the time, then this will be true. While get mouse button down would be if I press it once, then I need to take my finger off that button and press it again to detect this one. And the button up is, of course, if I take my finger, it will be an event. Okay, yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, if you have any other questions, Sean Botta, yeah, just go ahead and ask. I'll also try to make sure that everyone understands what's going on. What's the difference between different commands? Because Unity makes it so complicated for a lot of people, and yeah, you just grow gray hair by by having to deal with all this. So we're just gonna use mouse button down for now. I'm gonna specify the button number, which is 0. This is the left mouse button. And we're gonna instantiate a new projectile. So Unity provides us a method called instantiate and projectile prefab. Of course, I can give it more parameters. I can give it a parent, which is nice because the parent would be... Actually, the parent won't be the gun. And I can tell you why. So right now, the player gun... Let's actually see, because it's a fun experiment. So I give it the player gun, the transform. And now the problem is, if we go back to the code and we go back to the main scene, because you're in the prefab, actually here, before I go to the main scene, I want to do two things. I want to create the initial point. So this is gonna be a point in front of the object, and here I can do this. I can select this one and put this, and or this is the fire location. So the trick is switch to isometric, switch to this. Of course, we can make the gizmos a little smaller because it's quite annoying. Okay, but it's good to see here. Okay, I have the initial point, so it's positioned correctly, but now I need to position correctly from the side. So this is the initial point. This is where the bullets will be actually get instantiated, and now I can just drag and drop this one. And the projectile prefab, I need to go to the prefabs projectile. And this is it for the weapon. This is how the weapon should be specified, and I think we're done here. And now I need to move the game here because we can actually see the projectiles. And you'll see something fun. So the projectile gets instantiated, as you can see here, but it's not shown because probably they're the other way around, or someplace else, someplace completely else than were requested. So what we need to do, I think it's better to just get the reference to this. And then we need here two things. We need first to change the transform position to the initial point. This is already transformed, so I don't have to specify transform. And also I need to specify the rotation. This will get the correct rotation of the initial point and correct rotation and correct position from the point. So what's nice is the fact that this takes into account the player's position, the camera's position, and then the actual initial point of the weapon. So as you can see right now, I'm shooting projectiles. Yay, we made progress. We actually can shoot projectiles. One thing to note here, the projectiles actually are the wrong way, so they need to be facing that way, so we need to fix that. And of course they are too slow, so I'm gonna go to the projectile prefab. I'm gonna go to the scene. I'm just gonna put this the other way around because I noticed that it was the opposite. So that's one thing, and of course let's put the speed to 50 because we need more speed to this. Going back, play. So now we have projectiles. So it's progress because this is starting to look like a FPS. So one problem that you notice here is the fact that the actual scene gets flooded with projectiles. So if I start the stats here, and we'll see that right now I average on 120 FPS or 130 FPS, it says here. If I just spawn projectiles, because in a shooter you need to just spawn projectiles all over the place. At some point, of course, you see it's moving because the projectiles interact with the character as well. So that's not what I want, but at some point the game will just perform very badly because the projectiles are not disposed of. Even though we don't see them, they're actually somewhere in this universe moving around indefinitely. So this is where the projectile lifetime comes into play. So that's the first thing. So I'll need a new float. Let's put it 2 seconds. And here we'll need to use the awake function. The awake function is called only once once the object gets created. And here it's called, there's a function called invoke. So what this does is actually say, oh, after a couple of seconds, because this takes seconds here, it says here in time seconds, it will evoke this method. Of course, you don't have this yet, so we need to create it. So I need to create this, and of course here I'm gonna use the Unity destroy, and to actually destroy an object we say destroy game object, and it will be this game object. So now if we run this, after 2 seconds the projectiles will automatically disappear. This is of course for the case where we shoot projectiles into infinity, because usually if we shoot them against a wall or against an enemy, they'll automatically disappear because they will be processed. So getting here, of course I don't need the stats anymore because that was relevant for showing you that how the FPS decreases, but now it's not the case. So now I just essentially took a couple of projectiles, and you can see they disappear after 2 seconds. So it's much better. We have done something really good for the game because it won't be slow after playing it for 2 minutes, right? So that's the first thing, and now we need to detect collisions with the projectiles, with the environment, and of course with the enemy once we create the enemy. So let's go back to the projectile prefab, and here I'd create a box collider. Of course, we need to see where the projectile is, and we need to get into the scene, and the box collider is a little higher, so is a little bigger. So going isometric, going Y, so this is from top, so we can see the projectile from top. Edit collider, and we're just gonna edit this collider. This will just edit it from top side, so this I still need to edit it from right and left side. So this is how the projectile looks on the left or right side, the collider. So I need to change this as well. And now it's a small cube, and it's a small cube that actually detects collisions. So I'm gonna set it to trigger. I don't need the projectile in the scene anymore because the projectiles get instantiated by the weapon. But to actually be able to detect collisions, between different objects. Object needs to be having the rigid body. So if I put rigid body to the projectile, this will make it physical object. So a problem would be that I don't want it, so I'm using is kinematic. So let's see if it works like this. So rigid body is kinematic. Going back to the projectile, and of course here in the projectile script there is this on trigger enter, and not trigger enter 2D because this is for 2D box colliders, but we're having the regular trigger enter. I'm gonna write hit something. I'm gonna write a message in the console that I'm hitting something. I just need this to see if it actually works, if it actually hits a particular object or not. Okay, let's do this. Okay, so now let's see if it hits. Oh, it hit something. So that's good because it actually says, oh, it hit something, So it would be nice if we hit something to actually, I don't know, this error sometimes appears. I don't know even from where it appears, but yeah, it's crazy. It's from when I imported the package, by the way. I don't think it's even from that. So the first thing, of course, you need to destroy the projectile. So we're going to destroy it the same as this one, but this one is called by invoke when the projectile gets created. If it's killed by the lifetime, of course, if we just leave it like this, this will still get triggered and we'll get an error because if the projectile hits something before 2 seconds, it will get destroyed and this one will try to destroy it again and it won't be possible. So let's see that error and see how to deal with that. It's actually not an error, it's just a warning message saying, hey, I think it's an actual error, but it's an error that doesn't break the code, that doesn't break the execution. So some errors, you can live with them, but I recommend you to not live with them. So hit something, it's good, but after 2 seconds, it should say, hey, wait a second, it's no error. That's interesting, because technically once I do this, it should give me an error because it tries to destroy this game object. So what I do here, just to make sure, if game object equals null, and it's actually not equals, this means that the game object still exists, it's not null, then I'm gonna destroy the game object. If not, then it's not worth to do it anymore. So with that said, I think now the projectiles are kind of ready. Okay. Whoa, my speed is crazy. Okay, so now we have the projectiles right. So if you have any questions regarding the character controller, the rigid body character controller, or the projectiles, or the prefabs, yeah, please leave them in the comment section. Now we're gonna move to the enemies, and this is probably the most fun part because we'll get to kill something. Actually, this is when it will become an FPS, a true FPS, right? So we're gonna quickly do an enemy, and the enemies, of course, they'll be done with the same technique. We're gonna do a prefab, which is gonna be done by an empty game object, and then we'll put something into them. So enemy, and then we're just gonna create an empty cube. Oh my god, this is a big enemy, but let's put this one inside here. Put it here. Where is it? Okay. You see how I detected, like, if the enemy was near the ground, I just dragged it and see if it intersected with the ground. Now I know it's close to the ground. This is one way to do it. I showed you how I did with the projectile. So I did it instinctively. So yeah, after some time you'll get the hang of it. Of course, the cube is inside. We won't need box collider here. We just need to change this a little. You know what? Let's make this a body. It's gonna be fun enemy. So I'm gonna duplicate this quickly. course, this is no way to do a 3D modeling, but is the way to do a game fast. So if you want to prototype, I think this is the best way to do it. It's so fast. It saves you a lot of time. Okay, so this is the enemy. Let's give it a color. Let's give it actually 2 colors. So I'm gonna create 2 materials. I'm gonna create duplicate. Control D to duplicate. Enemy material 2. So I'm gonna put this one red because enemies should be red, and this one let's put it yellow. I'm dragging and dropping the materials. Cool. So now we have an enemy. So let's make it a prefab, because right now it's not a prefab. How to determine if something is prefab? Well, it should be blue. Cube here is not blue. This means it's not a prefab. So we just drag and drop it. Boom, we have it a prefab. So now we have the enemy. We need also in this prefab, so we can edit it like by clicking this arrow, or by going here and clicking open prefab. Is the same. I'm gonna click open prefab. I'm gonna create a new box collider to the. Actually, should I create a box collider, or let's go to physics, and they'll do a capsule collider for this one. So capsule collider. I'm gonna edit the capsule collider quickly. So what capsule collider does differently than the box collider, I would say. So of course it takes a little more processing power, but the advantage of using the capsule collider instead of the box collider is that if you have like collisions with the wall and you move close to the wall, you can actually slide around at the wall, or walk on stairs quickly. So yeah, it's much better to use a capsule collider, but don't abuse it. I mean, just when it's necessary. So in this case, we're gonna need an enemy script. Oops. Enemy. This is the enemy script. By the way, someone said here, One Ton Studios that just bought Playmaker. So you see here, I just like right-clicked. I right-click here and I was like visual scripting. So Unity already did the Bolt integration, it seems. I'm not going to use Bolt because I don't know it. I think still for better results you have to learn code. But for prototyping is useful because it's much faster. But we're going to use programming. So here, enemy. So now we have the enemy script. So in the enemy we can do this. We can say, oh, public void got hit this, and we can say integer, which is the whole number, 1 2 3 10 100 damage. So we'll need to somehow be able to run this from the projectile. So how do we do this? How do we make a connection between different scripts? So for example, we have the projectile and we have this information other. So if I go to other and collider and the game object, this is the actual game object that collided with the projectile. So we know that the enemy has the enemy script. Be careful though, there is a problem here. If you have the colliders on the enemy cubes, you'll get the cubes instead, not the enemy script. So this is why you need to carefully make sure that we remove all the colliders here. But I did that, so that's fine. Only this collider. So when that function executes, it will give me this object, not the objects underneath it, because then we'll need this script, and this I'm showing you how to get the script. So get component, because that script is a component, and I'm getting the enemy script, enemy. So we'll put it in this variable. It's actually the projectile will get destroyed in any case. So if it hits something, it doesn't matter if it's the player, the enemy, the ground, or something else, it will get destroyed. But if we get the enemy, it says here, oh, we cannot. What is the problem here? Oh, wait a second. This is a function, so I need to. Hey Benjamin Frank, welcome to the stream. Yeah, this one is not the multiplayer because we already are streaming for 1 hour now, and probably it will be 1 more hour, so we need to go through the enemy stuff. If you want the multiplayer fast, you can check my Among Us series. Even though it's focused on the Among Us, it has multiplayer basics explained there as well using Photon. I'll be doing another live stream, probably, I think, with this game or another, to make it multiplayer. We need to split it up because I also got requests like to make better AI or better animations. I'll be doing different streams, so if you're interested in that, subscribe to the channel. Make sure, because I'll usually when I stream I say a couple of days earlier, so you just check it, and once the stream is announced, then yeah, if it's something interesting for you, then yeah, just drop by and we'll see what we can do. But yeah, if you don't want to wait, just check my Among Us series and you'll have everything about multiplayer there. So enemy, and now I need to see if that, so if this is not null, this means that the object that hit the projectile had the script enemy, and if it did, I can actually call the script here, hit this damage, and of course I need to specify a damage here. 10. So what this does, you see, it's public. So if this was not public, then let's make it like this to know actually how much damage we got. So if this was not public, I could not have called this in here. So this is basically what public does. It allows me to call stuff from one class to another. For variables, for the ones on top, it's a little more tricky because sometimes they might be dependent on other variables. So if we don't want other things to be able to change them, because for example, the movement might calculate something else. So you need to assign them through a public method like this one. For example, this one, I'm gonna put here, for example, private integer and HP, which is 100. So HP minus 100. I could have easily said, okay, I'm gonna put here, instead of enemy hit this, I could have put like enemy HP if it were public, but it's not. Yeah, equals enemy HP minus the damage that we just received. Well, the problem here is that this is not it. Once we change the enemy HP, the enemy might be dead at some point, right? And we cannot figure it out if we change this here. And then we need to implement the death mechanic in the projectile. So that's against the standards of how to make programming with classes. So all the stuff that's related to the enemy should be handled by the enemy. So of course we just need to say, hey, you got hit, and then you deal with it. It's not us, it's you have to deal with your own problems. So now let's see if I can hit the enemy. By the way, more questions please. I'm also looking at the chat. It's I would say how we see it in Discord, it's a dead chat. Yeah, but I'm looking at them all the time, so let's see if it works. Let's see. So got hit with 10, so yeah, so the enemy gets hit, so that's nice. So let's see. Oh, wait a second, needs to get hit with the damage, not. And if HP is not 0, is 0 or less than 0, why I avoid putting this equals. This equals is tricky. It works on integers because we have fixed numbers. But if we were to say, if these were floats and the number would have been 0.00012, right? Because it's a float and can have this value. And HP would be 0 and this would be equals. then the problem would be these values won't match. So of course in this case I need to make sure, this is just a precaution to make sure that everything is gonna run smoothly. Destroy, let's destroy the enemy. Hey, I'm good, I'm good. Welcome to the chat. Stuart. Good, I'm just making FPS. We're just doing the enemy. Oh, let's see if the enemy dies now. So I think we created the bullet sponge. It should be 10 times. I think the enemy has 100 HP and the projectile has 10 damage. So that means I have to fire 10 projectiles to kill it. So let's see if it's 10 projectiles or more. It should be 10 projectiles. 1, 2, 3. Maybe. Ah, it didn't get hit. So you see here, it's a small problem because didn't get hit. It looked like it got hit, but you see the projectiles are actually moving past the enemy, kind of very, very close to it. So here, one problem that annoys like why games are good or bad, and this is like the game feel. So this prototype doesn't have any game feel. So the game feel is actually when you get some feedback on what your actions are. So in this case, I don't have any recoil. I don't have any visual acknowledgement that the enemy got hit. So of course you might put some particles, but if time allows us to do that. So I'm just gonna write down particles because it's kind of annoying to actually not see what the enemy is doing. But Benjamin Frank, was that an error from the tutorial? Okay, let's make now the enemy move on the map and follow the player. So to do this, Unity provides us a thing called navigation mesh or NavMesh. So here we need to go to AI and navigation, and this will open the navigation panel. So of course we have inspector lighting, which I mentioned previously, and navigation. And in the navigation, we can generate a nav mesh where the enemy will know how to move around. So how to do this? Of course, to make the enemy navigate, we need to select the environment first and make sure that it's static here. And let's see what types of static is. We need to make it, I'd say everything static, but let's try it like this. Yeah. Let's try it like this. So I'm gonna just bake this animation, just bake it, bake. And now the nav mesh gets built. Of course, it needs to have the object marked as static, and you cannot move the objects. Once you process them, you have to clear the navigation mesh in the edit phase and then create it again. Whoa. It's kind of a big map that we provide. So that's why it took so much time. Yeah, so if you want to do more damage to the head, actually I thought about that. So what you can do instead is to actually, so yeah, just why not? Let's just quickly do it. So to better explain it, so because this stream is actually titled "Let's Make an FPS." It's not I'm making an FPS. No, we're making an FPS. So this is gonna quickly do this. So I'm gonna create a script called take damage. So what this script is gonna do is gonna be put on different parts of the enemy, and it will take damage, and of course it will let's say it will multiply it. Of course, the damage that we're gonna get is gonna multiply it, and it's gonna apply it to the enemy script. So I'm gonna go to the enemy. Of course, we still need to have the capsule. Let's remove this for some reasons, and I'm gonna put the two colliders on the body. Box collider. So this one has a collider. Now let's put a collider on this one. Let's put a collider on this one and move it on both legs because it's not really. So now we have the body, the legs, and then the head, right? So you can hit the enemy in one of these parts. So now we just need to make sure. Let's say this one. This I'm gonna move the colliding parts on top, and so this one have colliders. So I'm gonna select all of them. I'm gonna attach the take damage script, and in here I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna say, okay, so serialize field integer, private integer, private. By the way, if you don't specify private, it will be automatically specified. So that's called implicitly, and this is called explicit specification. So multiplier. Let's say by default, every part of the body takes the same damage. And now public, because you need to call this take damage. Damage. Of course, we need to relay this to the enemy. So do take damage, because it doesn't allow us to have the same name as the parent. So let's just say we need the enemy script. And there are two ways to get the enemy script. So the first way would be to make this serializable field and just drag and drop the enemy. But since you know these take damages scripts are inside the enemy object, I can do the following. In awake, I can say enemy get component in parent enemy. So this will say, oh, where are you? So right now I'm in this cube. It will go to the parent. It will say, oh, get me your enemy component, and it will get me that enemy component script, and we will assign it here. So now that we have it, we can just say, oh, enemy equals damage multiplied with multiplier. So and of course the enemy needs to have a function. So enemies hit this. So enemy hit this, and it will take this damage and multiplier. And let's say, and one thing here, let's just put in a string. A string can contain some characters, and let's say name. And this would be the body part name, so to say. So hit name multiplied by, and put here this damage, or damage took. And this will hit the enemy with that damage. Of course, we need to do a little more change here. We need to go to the projectile, and instead getting the enemy script, you need to get the take damage script. And then, of course, the take damage has different function. Is actually called do take damage, and here we will have the damage. So if I do this, and of course I want to specify, I want to name the parts, so we'll just call it. Okay, so this is the body. So I'm just gonna say body. Just gonna say legs. I'm say head. One thing to note here, now we are using, I mean, for example, I say, okay, body takes 1 damage, head takes multiplied by 5, but legs take divided by 2 damage. Now we're using integers, and I think we cannot really make it work like this, because the multiplier for legs would be 0.5, and 0.5 is not an integer, so it doesn't allow me to do that. So of course we need to change the damage system to floats, which will allow us. So this is one example of difference between variables. I'm gonna quickly change everywhere because we changed the system. So take damage. The multiplier can be, or yeah, it needs to be a float. But now what we can do is, of course, assign different multipliers, and yeah, to actually do a division, we just say multiply it by 0.5, and that's actually dividing it. So body takes 1 multiplied with the damage, head legs take 0.5 damage multiplied with the damage, and the head takes 5 times. So let's check it out. I think I put the colliders, so everything should work. Okay, got hit with 5. Hit legs with damage by 5. Hit body with the damage by 10. And let's see if head got hit. Hit head with the damage by 50. So yeah, if I shoot it twice, then it's dead. So yeah, of course we get some enemy also has this got hit by, but we don't need it because we have it in take damage script. So basically this is how you can actually put damage on different parts of the body on the player. So yeah, that's the nice part about this stream, because it's not scripted. I just have some main guidelines, and then you from the chat can suggest things, and if it's doable, if it's in the time, then you just go and do it, and why not. But now let's get back to the navigation. So as you can see, this is the NavMesh. This is where the enemy can move around, so it can move around the walls. It actually provides this nice feature that it takes into account the walls and stuff, so it's not gonna go through the walls for us, and it can actually go on the ramps, so that's also good. But now the enemy, to actually move it, we need to add some new functionality. So for here, I need to go to Unity NavMesh, and yeah, I can just go to the Unity documentation, because that's how we make it happen. We need a NavMesh agent. So you don't need to know everything from the start. You just need to know, hey, to actually move something around that's not the player, we can use a NavMesh. So what you can do here is go to the enemy prefab and add on the NavMesh agent. So NavMesh agent adds an actual collider, I'd say, which needs to be adjusted, because this is how it will map to the scene. The enemy script needs to have the following. It needs to have the NavMesh agent, and of course you see once I write it, it says, oh, it's not available because I don't have it, because I need a new using. So I can say using Unity Engine AI. And of course I need to take it. Right now it's on the object, but it's not in this script. This script doesn't know about this at the moment, so we can just use awake for this. Usually the initialization part is happening in the awake. So NavMesh agent. Oh, my bad. So the NavMesh agent now is received. But we need one more thing. We need the player. So there are a couple of different ways to get the player, but I think the easiest one would be to so one question: if I join the game, this error appears, non-reference exception, object reference not set to instance of an object player controller. So if I join the game, so probably there is a problem in the player controller, so you might want to check the code. I mean, I provide the code for that tutorial. I provide it in WordPress articles, so you can check that as well. I think you have a problem. There is a null reference exception, so that means that some object didn't get initialized properly. So of course you need to give me the exact line what it says there, like at line 41, and see, maybe just take that line and see what the problem is there, element by element, and see which element is not assigned, because I'm sure that something is not assigned. So for the player to be taken into account, I can do the following. I can just tag the player as player, and then once an enemy gets created, actually I don't need to tag the object as player. I can find objects of type, which this function will search the whole scene and will get me all the objects of a particular type. But I don't think we have a player script, so that's annoying. But we have the Rigidbody first person controller, which is unique to the player. So we're just going to leverage that functionality. So we're just going to say, okay, the enemy. So because I don't want to create a player script, that would be the ideal way to do it. So how is that script called again? It's Rigidbody first person controller. Of course, I have to write it down because there's no auto completion. And now I have to use this, say player, and getting the player. Find object, because you just need only the player and the Rigidbody. Okay, one problem here. So one problem here would be that this function is actually taking a lot of resources from the processing power. So we need to call it in awake, which is called only once the enemy gets instantiated. So make sure you don't call it in any update loops, because if you call it, it will take a big performance hit. So yeah, just make sure to do that. Okay, because now we will be going into update, which is going to be called every single frame of the enemy. And here we're gonna set the NavMesh agent. We're gonna do some stuff with the NavMesh agent, and they changed the actual way how to work with this NavMesh agent. Target, no target. I don't know exactly the new way to do it, because it was destination, yeah. So we set the destination and we set it to player, but of course the player is the Rigidbody first person controller, and we need the transform component, and here we need the position. So if we just say every frame, please update the NavMesh agent so that it gets the target of the player position, right? So if I just play it now, of course I need to separate this because I don't want the game view. I want to be able to play it and oh, wait a second. Oh. So right now, the enemy follows the player, so that's nice. I mean, that's what we want. Let's see if the enemy follows me on this. It should. Okay, that's good. Because the NavMesh was created using this path as well. So yeah, let's see what it does here, because it was a jump. So I'm curious. Probably it won't be able to go that way. So I think it will come that way, because it automatically knows that, hey, I cannot go that way, so I'm just gonna come this way. Haha. So so Jamie, welcome to the chat. Welcome to the chat. How to make a random roll generator with maximum of like 1 or 2 of this roll gave to the player on multiplayer. So yeah, what I would say for the role generator would be to have, for example, let's say you have 2 roles, right? So we can say generate a random range between 0 and 100, and if it's below 50, then assign the first role, and if it's above 50, then assign the second role, and this is like 50-50% chances of getting one or the other role. So you can do that. So yeah, I can quickly show you what I mean. So this is not related to this project, but let's say we have random range 0-100, so it's between this range, and of course I'm gonna get, so this is an integer value. So I'm gonna say if the value is less than 50, then this is the first role, and else that means the value is above 50, and then this is the second role. Of course, if you have 3 roles, then you have to do it like below 30, and then else if the next one would be below 66, and the last one, yeah, it's so I hope this is clear. Good. Now we have the enemy that moves around and follows the player, and let's make the enemy fire back at the player. So for this we need to add some new functionalities to the enemy script. So we're gonna say this is our private, so this is not important, so we're gonna do some serialized field. I'm gonna say private detect range, and let's say 100. So this is gonna be the detect, oh wait a second, I need to give it a type, so I'm gonna give it a float. So this is gonna be the range of the enemy. So yeah, you're welcome, Jamie. Yeah, stick around if you want to learn how to make a FPS, and now we're discussing about enemies and how to do a simple AI in Unity. So if that's interesting, then stay tuned. So right now we are doing the detect range, and a problem here is like, how do I visualize the range? So Unity provides us with a nice feature called on-draw gizmos. So this one actually happens in the editor, not in the runtime. And it actually displays some additional things that allow us to make proper decisions. So I'm going to show you gizmos color. I'm going to set the color to yellow first. I'm going to gizmos draw wire sphere, because this is one that's, I'm going to put it at the exact position as the enemy, and I'm going to give it the radius of the detect range, of course. So right now the enemy should provide this sphere. So this yellow sphere is the detection range of the enemy. So by the way, if you don't see this, you might have this gizmos thing turned off, so make sure that you have turned it on. By the way, we can specify the detection range, but right now we're not changing the prefab. If you change the prefab here and it's not the other prefabs, you will see that this this field gets bolded and gets like a blue line here. So to apply this for every prefab, we have to go to overrides and apply all. So don't forget that. But first, let's say, okay, I like this range. I like 50.8, and I'm gonna override. I'm gonna move the enemy here. So the thing is, instead of making the enemy randomly follow the player from everywhere, because in real games enemies would be idling or patrolling or doing their NPC stuff. So what we can do is here is just check the range. So every single frame we check, we need the boolean, is player in range. Let's say, yeah, it's false right now, but then we need to say distance to player. And here we can use vector3, and let's get the position of the enemy and then the position of the player. And hey, wait a second, we need the position, we have the position of the player, which is this one. And if distance to player is smaller than detect range, then now we move to the enemy. We move the enemy to the player. Actually, we don't need the is player range. So we just need the distance to the player, and if the transform dot position from the enemy side is the position of the enemy, and player transform position is the position of the player. So we get the position of them. By the way, we can use vector 3D distance to work with 2D as well, so you can do 2D games as well with this strategy. But yeah, right now the player is kind of far from the enemy, but as you see, as we move close to the enemy will get activated. So let's see that. Oh my god, no, no, no. If you run faster to exit the range, it will stop. But I think, can we run faster? Yes, I think we did run faster. Hahaha. Enemy. So if you want to change the enemy speed, you can go to enemy and NavMesh agent and speed, and you can change the speed of the enemy here. It will be problematic if the enemy has a lot more speed. But now let's make the enemy fire. So we need to copy paste this line and say fire range. And we don't want the enemy to fire from the same distance, so we're just gonna put 20, and we're gonna show the fire range as well. It's not necessary, but it's nice to see. So now let's see. Oh, wait a second. Why is the fire range bigger than the other range? Well, that's curious. So usually the fire range would be smaller than the detection range. I mean, that's the common thing, right? So let's make it 7.5, and of course I need to overwrite it, otherwise it won't be to all the enemies. So now this is the detection range of the player, and this is the firing range. So when the enemy has the player in firing range, then it will fire to the. So here we need to do some changes because the firing range is closer to the detection range. So this if will be true because it will be in the detection range, but it will be in the firing range as well. So what we can do here is create an if-else instruction set. So what we can do is if fire distance to player is smaller than the firing range, if we do this, we can fire. But the problem is then it also moves the enemy even closer to the player, and you want to stop the movement. So what you can do here is put it in the else if. So what else if does is first it checks the first if, and if this first if is triggered, then it won't go here. So it won't move the enemy once it reaches a closer position to the player, so it can actually fire. So to make the enemy fire, we need a projectile prefab, and of course you'll see we need an actual way to specify the cooldown, otherwise it will just fire continuously. So there are a couple of ways how to do it. So yeah, I'm not gonna show you like this because if it won't work. This is the cooldown and the current cooldown. So this is a trick that I like to use to implement cooldowns. So we don't want, because if we just write here instantiate projectile prefab. By the way, we cannot instantiate the projectile prefab here because it will actually be instantiated in the enemy, like how it was the gun. So we need to actually go into the enemy and specify a transform we need the transform with the initial projectile point. Of course, now it goes. By the way, if you have any questions regarding this, I can answer all of them. Just leave them in the chat. Of course, as you can see, I'm answering some other questions. It's not only about the project here, but the project here is the one that matters the most at the moment. So the initial projectile position would be the one that projectile starts, and of course rotation. You'll see it's funny because right now the enemy, I think it won't rotate this to the player, so it's gonna be interesting to see. So I'm putting the projectile prefab, but now we need the projectile points, so I'm gonna quickly create a new empty child. And of course right now it's not quite visible, so this is why I like to set like a marker or a visual marker, it doesn't matter, but a way to see what's happening, where this point actually is. And of course, to make sure, we need to move it to isometric view, position it on the top, position it on the side, make sure that is the correct position, and then put it to the enemy. So we have this in place. And now let's see if it fires actually. So of course, right now if I'm just running this, it will fire a lot. So we need to actually make sure that the cooldown is in place as well. So what I like to do for the cooldown is a trick. So we know that there is this real time since startup, which is the time from once the game was started to the actual time we're at now, right? So this is called real time since startup. And now how to detect cooldown? Well, it's simple. We can just say once a projectile was fired, we know it was fired at this time. And now the real time since startup increases. And now it's this. And now if you say, oh, if this time in between is bigger than the cooldown, it means that the cooldown has passed and we can fire a new projectile. So how do we do this? Of course, we need three things. We need first if time real time since startup minus current cooldown. If this one, if they'll be, because once it's fired, so once it's fired, it will be real time since startup, right? So they'll be on the same page, they'll be on the same level. But real time since startup will keep increasing, and the value will keep increasing. But now the cooldown max comes into play and says, hey, wait a second, if this is bigger than the cooldown max, then this means we can fire a new projectile. And of course you need to move this code inside the if. Don't forget to put in the brackets, because if not, then it won't be executed in this if. So we can also change the cooldown as we like. But I think for now it's quite fine. So let's just try this and see how this works. So whoa, oh no, ha. So you see, this is the problem. The enemy, once it's too close to the player, it's not rotating towards the player anymore. So we kind of miss with the projectiles, we miss the player. So how do we rotate the enemy to actually shoot the player all the time? So luckily for us, we don't have to do any special complex things. We actually have to just say transform, which is the enemy transform, and there is this look at, and this requires a target, and of course you can say, oh, the player transform. As you can see, it's only in the fire range if it's below the fire range limit, because if it's above, if it's in the detect range, it will automatically rotate and move around the path to be correctly positioned. But at some point, once it reaches that smaller range, it won't rotate anymore. So we need to provide a way how the enemy to rotate, right? So okay, so now it shoots me. and you see the player rotates, the enemy rotates towards the player. It even rotates like this. Whoa. It even rotates like this, which is crazy. Like, check this out. Whoa, 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 dude, don't rotate like that. Whoa, don't rotate like that, please. So what we can do here is a trick. So instead of rotating the whole enemy, we can just rotate the initial projectile point. So instead of rotating the enemy, we just rotate the initial projectile point. But this will make it look a little weird because the enemy might be facing a wrong angle and the player will be shot at correctly. But the problem is that the enemy won't be facing correctly the player. So let's see what this does. So okay, it shoots, and if I move, you see the enemy shoots me as intended because you see the projectile is coming towards me. But the problem is the enemy is not rotated as well. But I need the enemy to not rotate on all axes. So what we can do is, of course, we just copy paste this and put the enemy transform back. But we need to make sure that the enemy transform rotation is on which axis is the problem. So I think we need to make sure that that axis is 0, so you don't have the problem anymore. So let's see which axis was the problematic one, because this one points. So the x-axis, I don't want the player to rotate on the x-axis. So we need a way. Let's see if Euler angles. This one will provide me with the x, y, and z angles. But here I need to actually... No, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do transform that rotation, quaternion Euler angles. And here we're going to say transform rotation Euler x, y, and z axis. But we're going to not use x axis because I want it to just rotate it on y axis, on z axis, but I don't want it to rotate on the x axis. So basically what it does, the first look at, it rotates the enemy towards the player, but then we override that rotation by removing the x part of the rotation with and replacing it with 0, and this will allow us to point towards the player. As you can see, it points towards the player, which is nice, but it don't go crazy if I jump past the enemy. It don't rotate on a weird way. So yeah, so right now I think the most basic mechanics that I was looking forward for this stream are in place. I'm looking for chat if you want some extra feature added, because we'll do the stream a little more. If not, I want to implement some particles. Why not? Because we already have them, and see how to make the game a little fun, because right now it's not fun at all. We cannot even see if the enemy got hit properly. So I'll be working on that, but if you have any other suggestions, I'm looking for them, because I'm really curious what you have in mind. So with that said, let's look at the particle system that is in the standard asset pack that I was just imported. So let's see the explosion. I think probably this one is the only... Oh, it was in the... I need to put it again in the scene. Yeah, let's just move around. The problem is I cannot see the effect. Let's put the explosion mobile. Okay. So this is the effect. So how do we put this explosion? Well, the easiest way to do it would be to attach it to a projectile. So I'm just gonna say, oh, projectile, let's say private, let's say it's a game object, because every thing in the scene, it's a game object, basically. Prefab. You mean like a player HP bar, right? Yeah, we can do that as well. I'm gonna write it down in my notes. Let's quickly do the explosion thingy. Game object, of course, if so the position for the explosion would be other, and the point. I need to get where the collision happened. Actually, that would be the most I think closest point. No, that's contact. Offset value of this collider. I'll just use the projectile position because that's where the explosion should be anyway. So it doesn't matter the rotation, so I'm just gonna set the position, and let's see. Let's put the, I need to go to the assets, prefabs, projectile. I'm just gonna lock this a little. No, we're gonna go in the open prefab because it's easier to do it like this. I'm gonna put the prefab explosion mobile to here, and let's see what this does. So let's actually so yeah, I have a big ass explosion. Whoa, oh my god, such a big explosion. But yeah, let's leave it like this. One thing to note here, these are particles. These create a lot of issues if the game just runs them all over the place. So what I would do, of course, I would just use an invoke. Let's try to see if this works, because after 1 second, and see, I don't know exactly if this works because this object will be deleted, but I'm gonna, and we need to access this from another function. We need to actually have it in the class. So explosion instance, I'm gonna put it here and instantiate here, and then let's see if this works. I'm not sure. So the thing is to try to test and see what works and what doesn't work, and figure it out along the way. But of course, if you know, for example, oh, I'm going to instantiate a lot of these objects like projectiles, particles, and stuff like this, it's better to keep in mind that, oh, I need to do that after, because otherwise I'll be in a lot of problems. So you see, it didn't work. It's still here, the explosion. That didn't left the maybe because this is not existing anymore. So what I would do in this case, because it's no problem, yeah, I just put this back here, and in the explosion, so I would need a script to destroy this after some seconds, right? So yeah, let's just do it simply. So scripts, kill it with fire. So this script will trigger. Hi there. Hi, welcome to the stream. Welcome to the stream. So let's say kill it with fire, and then say float time, and how much time do we want it to kill it with fire, and let's say invoke destroy this time. Now destroy game object. So now we need to apply kill it with fire to to the script. So we need to apply the script to the projectile. So you can just go to the projectile and kill it with fire. Okay, time 1 second. Let's say I want not the projectile. My bad. But actually, we can do that for the projectile as well. It's a good thing. But this, we shouldn't do that right now. We should just put it for the explosion mobile, because that's what we need to kill it with fire. So let's kill it with fire now and see if this works, and then we'll go to the explosion mobile, and you can see there they get deleted as well. Projectiles get deleted, so sometimes projectiles are faster than the collision detection with the floor. So if you're too close, the projectiles actually go through the floor. So there are a couple of ways to deal with this. One way would be to increase the collider of the floor, to increase the size. Other would be to increase the detection collision, but how many times per second the collision is detected, or set the collision to be predictive. But yeah, that might take some performance off, so you need to make sure if you should take those decisions or not. So let's put some more enemies first, and then we'll see the player HP. So the enemies. Okay, as you can see, I'm using the same technique. So for this one, I wanted to put it on top of that, so I'm gonna position it like that and position it like this. And now I made sure that on standing here, as you can see, I'm checking it here. Okay, so let's do the player health thing. So the player health would be to use canvas with some UI. So to do this, I would go to game object, UI, and yeah, if you just put the text here, then it will, oh, it's actually not good. It's not good that what happened. I need to create a new canvas. I think it did create, it has its own canvas. So if I go to 2D and double click the UI, this is the UI canvas. Actually, I'm gonna use this one. So I'm gonna go to UI, text. Update it, make it bigger. Oh, wait a second, the UI doesn't have any canvas, so just remove it. This is from the default scene, so I think I'm gonna remove it completely, see if this works, and then we'll just move forward with this. So it's no problem, everything is fine. But you see, like, this is the whole process. I mean, I want to do this kind of process videos to see what problems might appear and what's actual game development process to get something working, how to make a game go. So now if I do the canvas, now it creates a new canvas, and now it creates the text, which is nice, and I can say, oh, player HP. I can make it bigger. Let's put it here. If I just leave it like this, then it will not be it might be problematic to be seen, so I'm gonna put an image. By the way, the order is from the draw order is from top to bottom, so of course the text I want it to be on top of the image, so it would be below the image here. So this to be black, but with a transparency, and the player HP with let's say green, right? Because why not? This is just the text player HP, of course, it's not the actual player HP. So the actual player HP would be this one, and let's say it's 100 right now. If I start the game right now, of course, it won't work. It is just a plain text. So to make it work, I would need to do a couple of things. First, I would need to create a player script, which I haven't done it. So that's something that it seems that's unavoidable. So at this point, I'm just gonna create the player script. It's no problem. It was a necessity. I just did it, and that's it. So you're gonna attach the player script to the Rigidbody Fps Controller. This one has a capsule collider because we'll need this to detect collisions as well. With the projectile, we haven't done that, so there. Okay, and here, so here first, I want this. I want hey bro, can you record a movie about how we can set different prefabs and different scene in a multiplayer game? Yeah, to create to create different scenes. You just create the scenes as regular Unity scenes, and Photon allows you to change scenes. And if you change the scene on the master client, then all the clients automatically get changed scenes as well. So that's easy fix. And the second one, can you different prefabs, probably different prefabs for each player. So that's a little tricky, but it's doable of course. So what you need to do is create the prefabs that you want, put them in a resource folder, because Photon only instantiates prefabs if they are in the resource folder. It doesn't matter where the resource folder is. It can be in the main assets folder, it can be in the yeah, let's make this big a little. So yeah, it can be in the prefabs or resource folder, and then once each client gets the message, hey, you are in the room, so not you are in the room and you actually play the game, they will instantiate which prefab they want. So probably you want to set up a role system, so you first assign roles to each player, and then each player gets that role and then instantiate the correct prefab. The other way around it, so a much easier way to do it, instead of having different prefabs, what you can do is to have a prefab that contains different hierarchies of different objects. So say I can put it in this scene as well to quickly show it. So if we switch scenes again, go. I can say, oh, this is the player prefab, and then I'll create some two game objects here, and let's say here's role 1 and here is role 2, and we can just say, oh, I'm assigned role 1 and you're assigned role 2, but this is the same player prefab, so I can just simply deactivate the game. I can just deactivate them all, so the prefab can look like this, and we can activate just the role that we want. So we can just activate the role 2 and it gets activated. So I think this is the much more simpler than just instantiating different prefabs. Plus, if it's any game and you want the default movement on all prefabs, it doesn't matter. I mean, it might be that the movement is different, but if it's not different, then you have a problem. So yeah, this is what you can do, is like have the default stuff on top and then the role specific in the down below in the hierarchy. So you can do that instead. So that's about it. Let's go for the player again. So the player, the private, what we need here, of course, is the HP, which is 100, and an update loop, which updates the text. So to update the text, we need the serialized field again, so it's not public, as you can see. And the text is provided by this text and the player HP text field. And of course, you need to import Unity Engine UI to have this text not be read again. And here player HP text dot text equals HP. Of course, this is an integer and we cannot assign strings to integers directly, but luckily there is 2 strings, so we can convert it. And now this player HP will be shown on that particular text. Of course, what we need to do, one last thing, we need to attach this field to this field. So we just drag and drop this one, quickly click it and quickly click it again to see if it's the correct one. So one part of the problem is solved. Now we have the player HP showing, but the problem is the player doesn't process its own hits. So if the enemy hits me with a bullet, actually oh my god, the damage is high. I'm taking the hit, but the bullet doesn't process any hit to this, so we need to make sure that that is processed as well. So in the projectile, I would say, so of course we say, oh, take damage if this is the enemy, but now we say player other game object. By the way, we can actually put a turn here. This means that the function, if this was an enemy and it got hit, this stops here and it stops the execution, it terminates the execution, so it doesn't check for the player to get hit in the same projectile. So if the projectile hit the enemy, of course it cannot hit the player, or the other way around. So, but of course, since the code is like this, you cannot say, oh, like that or that. You have to check one first. So we check the enemy first, because that's the more the case that comes much faster, because the player is much skilled than the AI, I hope. And now if the player is not null, then we'll oh wait a second, made a mistake here. If the player is not null, then we can say player do take damage. By the way, I don't have this in place yet, but no worries, I can just copy, and of course you need to make it public. If it's private, it doesn't work. Do take damage and float damage, or I need to change the HP to float. By the way, here if you say HP to string and it's a float, you'll see that it will say 100.00. You'll see in a second. So HP minus equals damage minus equals this one, or this one, HP equals HP minus damage, is the same. So you can choose whatever you want. Of course, minus equals is much faster to write, so we're just gonna go with that, but it's your choice. So right now, one problem that we will have is the player takes damage. The damage is displayed on the screen, but since it's a float, because we might want fine-tune it, like let's say if the player gets hit in the head or the player gets hit in the body, we might need to fine-tune it. So of course, let's see how that goes. So player HP is 100. Oh my god, oh, it's 70, 60. Oh, it worked. Actually, I'm using the dark themes. So by the way, hi Mark, Nabul. I'm actually using dark themes, but I thought for live streams and tutorials to make a theme that's much more easier or much more default for everyone to to get accustomed to. I mean, this is not even how I prefer my Unity to, like the layout. I prefer it other way around. But I changed it so people don't have to worry about the layout stuff. They can focus on the content. So basically it's the content. The content is much more important than the theme in this one. But if you'd prefer the content to be delivered in the dark theme, it's no problem. If a lot of people want that, I'm going to create a poll and see and change it. So okay, so now we can exit the 2D mode, and of course the canvas is in the sky, so we can go. But if you go like this, it might take some time. We can just double click on the Rigidbody player controller and go here. So that's one way to do it. So yeah, now the enemies actually hit us and we take a lot of damage. We can implement the HP. These are quite good. I mean, like, luckily I haven't implemented the death mechanic. We can do that fast. So what we can do is go back to canvas, set it to 2D again, create a new image. This should be on top of everything. And now to make it full screen, I'm setting it to nice. I'm learning how to do it. By the welcome to the stream. I'm learning how to do Discord bots, and I'm in the process of making, but more on that later. Mostly on redefined Discord. So if you're interested in that, yeah, no, I've answered it. So you'll see in a second. You are dead. Of course, it's I went. It's on purposefully misspelled everything because I think it gives a nice authentic vibe instead of like you're dead. I don't know. It makes it feel much more. So of course I want this image to appear. I need the text to be parented to this. You are dead. And I want it to appear once the player reaches 0 health. So private game object, you are dead screen. So if the HP is below 0, set active. True. And set active is a function from the game object, so since this is a game object, that works. Yeah, do take damage, and now just... But it's kind of brutal. I mean, like, the enemies are tough. Like, they kill you. Oh, hi Vlad, welcome to the chat. Let's put in the you are dead function. So let's see how that goes. So I'm just gonna get killed by these bots and see how that goes. Okay. Oh my God, this is brutally killing me. These bots are tough. Oh no, no, I'm dead. I'm dead, completely dead. By the way, in the background, the bots still kill me, but that doesn't count. It's just you're dead, and that's fine. Yeah, we can even put a restart button just to say. I mean, like a simple restart would be, I think, to load the same scene. I don't know if that works. It's I can do that, but by the way, if you have any, not any questions, any suggestions for features that I can implement in this game. Like, I don't know, something simple, not like multiplayer, because multiplayer is a whole other story, so we cannot do that in once. I mean, like, the stream is already 2.5 hours long, so yeah, that's kind of quite some work. But yeah, other than this, what can I show you? So now we can group stuff nicely, so we can create a new game object and say enemies and put them together nicely. Of course, this can be extended in like creating an enemy spawner, that instead of like randomly putting enemies on the map to spawn them at some key points in the map, or creating a scoring system, because you don't have that. The scoring system might have a visual part, which is of course like the score coming out of the enemy and adding it to your high score, and also like how we can take into account whenever we kill an enemy to add it to the new score and stuff like that. So we can do that as well. There are a lot of opportunities for this game. So one thing that I want to stress the most is how to make it fun. So as you see, initially we had we didn't have any way of figuring out what's the interaction, like when a projectile made contact with something, right? So now we do have this, and it's quite nice because you can see, we can actually determine if the enemies get hit or not, or if it's not around them. But it's quite tough. I mean, like, the enemies are quite tough, I would say. So let's quickly make, when you kill an enemy, since the enemy has the reference to the player, which is nice, but has the Rigidbody first-person controller, which is not nice. But now we have the player, so you can change it to player. Of course, you need to do some small adjustments. I think this is just the adjustments that we need. And once the enemy is killed, we can just say, hey, the Willy Hot Dog, welcome to the stream. Yeah, there were a little more. Plus, I think we peaked at, let's see, 15 people. So that was the peak. Yeah, I mean, it's good. Like, some people watch it in replays because some other people cannot see it when they're sleeping, or it's too early in the morning. So of course, time zone is a problem. So of course, this is a small channel. So I'm really glad that you are watching this. And if you enjoy it, don't forget to leave a like, and yeah, join the Discord server, because we do a lot of game development over there as well. So here I want the player to take damage, but instead of taking damage with minus, which actually would be like, if I minus damage, it will give me life. So once I kill an enemy, I'll actually get more life out of the enemy. So let's see how that works. So I'll get like 20 HP more. Yeah, so get 20 HP more. Let's see how that goes. Yeah, so let's kill this enemy. Okay, 90. So I had less and now I have 90. So yeah, I can actually, why did I had to go that close to the enemies? Where can I just shoot projectiles from far away? Because I can actually see once they're hitting the enemy. Of course, it would be nice if the enemy actually once it gets hit to not like randomly idle and just come at me, because it's like getting aggro. So actually, let's do this. So once the enemy gets hit, so it knows it's the player who hit it. So so aggro mode. So aggro mode means like when you hit an enemy, it doesn't matter the distance. It doesn't matter if you're not in that enemy's detection range. It means that enemy is enraged and it will follow you. So if the enemy was hit, then aggro mode true. So if the distance to the player smaller to detect range, or aggro mode true. So if the distance is smaller or aggro mode is true, then it will come after you and they will not be happy that you shot them. So you won't be able to pick off enemies from far away and get away with it anymore, because they just are aggroing on you. So let's see how that goes. So I'm gonna fire that one. Oh my. Oh, I implemented, yeah, if I shoot them in the head, they'll take a lot of damage. So yeah, I made that one. But yeah, you see, the enemy is aggroing towards me, even though I'm outside of the detection range. It doesn't matter anymore. The enemy is aggroed, so they're scared. They're not scared. They are actually. Yeah, let's do a big boss. Let's see if I have time, but yeah, why not? So I'm gonna duplicate this enemy prefab. And call it big boss, and I'm gonna put it in the scene because I want to see the scale of this. So it will be a small problem, because if we manually adjust the scale of all of these elements, they will be out of sync. So I can quickly show you what I mean. So if, for example, I just select everything and I change the scale, it goes crazy. So I can just put everything under a big object, and if I change the scale now, of course I need to uniformly scale this, but yeah, this is the idea. So also I need to change this base offset and radius, height. So this is the big boss, and the big boss actually has more projectile points, right? Because it's massive, it's big, and it's a boss. So okay. Yeah, so how do we do this? I mean, we can do it in the same enemy script, but the problem is I would need now more projectile points. So I'll create a new. Hey, welcome Sapphire Goodman. Welcome to the stream. So I'm gonna create a list of transform and the projectile points. And of course, you need to initialize the list with a list, and the list is not you need using for this one, projectile points. So once we fire, what we can do here right now is just gonna instantiate a projectile. So what we can do here is say create projectile, and I'm gonna put this code because it's gonna be repetitive, and the repetitive code should be put in separate functions. So we can say transform projectile point, and I'm just gonna Control X this and Control paste this. Projectile point. Oh, wait a second. This one. This one puts the projectile. I can actually remove the projectile, initial projectile point, because what you can do instead is use the projectile points. And here, of course, change the look at for everyone, but I can do for each. I'm gonna put this inside here. Change this to this, and then I'm gonna create a projectile. For that projectile, particular projectile point, for the big boss, it will have a lot of projectiles. So, of course, you need to add this to to change this for the enemies as well, because they got it removed. You'll see what I mean. So now they have projectile points and it's an empty list. One trick here to add all of them, so we can manually add each one of them, but one trick here is to lock this. Select all of these and just drag and drop them here, and they'll automatically get instantiated here for the enemy. This is for the big boss. As well for the enemy, let's go here to the prefab. This needs to be changed as well because it's empty, and we just drag and drop here, and boom, we have it. So now let's see if it works. For the big boss should fire 3 projectiles at the player, so that's gonna be huge. Let's put the big boss in the enemies and let's see how that goes. Let's see how that goes. By the way, if you don't have time to watch the whole stream now, I'm gonna put timestamps for different sections of this live stream once it's processed by YouTube and it goes live, so you can actually watch whatever you want from it. But yeah, I'm gonna. Oh my god, it's coming. I think I need to increase the range because it's huge, because it's massive. The big boss, it definitely needs big ranges, right? So this will be exactly what I want. Of course, it's not in the prefab, it's in the I need to overwrite it. You see the detect range and the fire range are blue, but it doesn't matter right now. I'm just gonna see how we get killed by the big boss. Whoa! I also need to increase the health of the big boss, of course, because it's big and boss. So you see I don't have the health here, so I need to go to the enemy and make the HP serializable. One thing to note here that is really important is also like how do you structure your code. So the convention in C# would be to put in the fields that can be accessed by outside totally, like public fields first, and then serialize private, and then private, and then private functions, and then public, or yeah, you can do, but they are not combine this and this. It's a mess right now. I'm trying to keep some parts in a good state, but that's the idea. So now we have the HP, so we can change the HP of the enemy, of the big boss especially. You see I'm using the same script, so that's quite nice. And I'm changing. I just changed like how many projectiles can the enemy fire, how much HP it has, but it's using the same script, so that's really convenient for us because we can basically that's how we can reuse a lot of scripts. I can also show you how to use the other kill it with fire for the projectiles, because that's another nice reuse script. So I think, yeah, nice. I killed it. I like it. Also, it would be nice for once an enemy is killed, serialize private game object explosion. So once an enemy is killed, it would be nice to have a nice explosion, and probably this will end the stream. If you don't have any suggestions, this would be the final thing that we're implementing. So by the way, make sure you don't have the same name, as otherwise you might So I'm just gonna put this explosion. Right now it's not 100% safe, but I'm gonna do it like this. So I make sure that you're not changing here. I'm gonna actually, since these are still on the local object, I'm gonna apply all. I'm gonna go correctly to the prefab, and then I'm gonna put in the explosion. The explosion, I'm gonna use the explosion, and this is for the big boss, and for the smaller enemies, I'm gonna put explosion to them. Okay. Let's see now. How's it going? So now, not only that we have guns explosion, we have kill explosions. Whoa, what a nice explosion. So now let's see what happens when the big boss is killed. Whoa, that's a nice explosion. So by the way, I have 120 health, so what we can do here to make sure that we don't increase or decrease too much, we can actually say after the HP gets or damage or receives life, we can use a function called clamp, which first parameter is taking the HP, but then this basically clamps the value. So if the value is between two numbers, it won't do anything, but if the value is below the minimum, it will assign the minimum, and if it's above the maximum, it will assign the maximum. So in this case, if the health goes below 0, it will assign 0, and if it goes above 100, it will assign 100. So yeah, this is how to use to make sure that you're not like taking something out of the scope of your actual player life or stuff like that. So yeah. Oh yeah, I'm glad you like it, Sean. I'm glad you like it. By the way, we'll be wrapping up, so if you want to wrap up with some nice questions, we'll do a Q&A fast at the end, so stay tuned for that. Okay, just gonna kill this quickly. Yeah, but I wanted to see if the health works. So basically, if I have more health, if it's getting less. If it's getting 100. Now it should get 110, but with the clamp, I get just 100. So this works as expected. Okay, so I think this is it with the game up until this point. Probably would be nice to continue with a multiplayer thing or more animations, more in depth. I'll look into the possibilities. If you have suggestions, I'll look for them in the stream after it's published in the comments down below. I'm looking at that comment section, so please make sure you use it. So now if you have questions regarding the stream, regarding the Among Us series and anything, whatever you want, let's discuss a little about game dev. If not, then I'm gonna say a couple of words, and then we'll close the stream, because I think the time has come. So while I'm waiting for your questions, I quickly want to say that I started the series Learn C# in Unity. That's still ongoing. I'm also, in parallel with that, I've also started a small series with mistakes in programming. That's for general programming. Of course, it's geared towards Unity. So it's not only learning how to do the right thing, but also learning how to avoid mistakes and how to make sure that you won't fall into the easy mistakes, because most mistakes are not made by not having experience, but by being tired. I mean, like a lot of experienced programmers do these mistakes as well. So that's a nice video as well. I mean, that's one published for that. So it's called Mistakes, and it's going to be a small series. So probably a couple of more episodes on that, showing from my experience, like what I faced as a programmer, what are the issues, and so on and so forth. So yeah, okay. So by the way, the series where we'll be creating games, I want to take feedback from the community. I'm looking forward for taking feedback from you guys, and see what we can do together. Like for example, in this one we did HP, we did different body damage per player. So we did some stuff. So I'm looking for more, because this makes us all create a nice game. So that's gonna be a nice community game. Maybe after this I can publish it on itch.io plus the source code. If you're interested in that, I can do that as well. Right now it's not set in stone, so I need to see how this series goes, but if it's gonna be nice, I'm probably gonna publish everything, so you can have a look and also look at the stream, so you can know exactly how to create your own games, and make sure to know exactly what shortcuts to take in order to optimize, because it's a lot of work. And yeah, by making the same mistakes as other people, you're just gonna get in this work loop instead of actually delivering something. So yeah, by just watching these streams, you learn from other people's mistakes. In this case, from my mistakes. I'm gonna do these unfiltered streams, which I'm gonna show you the problems that I face, because I face problems. How do I come up with solutions? How do I fix the issues? Because nobody is an expert, guys, and we just have to do what we can, and if we end up with a problem, then we might try to fix it. We might search on Google, we might search on Unity forums, and if we cannot fix it, then we come up with a different solution for that. There is this Vox game, I think it's called The First Tree, which was a massive success. By the way, it was in a visual programming language, but in Unity, but with, I think, Playmaker. And I've seen some interviews, and the creator said like he had some problems and didn't know how to solve them, but the game was almost due release, so he just figured out what he could do in that time, and that's it. And it was a success in that case as well. So it's no problem if you don't know how to figure something. You can use your imagination to figure something else, and figure out a way how to deal with that. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this stream. I'll see you in the next one, and thanks for attending.